This is the Khmer Times News. My name is Paolo Bornini, and these are your headlines. Myanmar continues to severely test the patience of other members in the ASEAN group. Sihanoukville businesses are threatened with closure if they do not deal with the continued wave of violence. And you, as an expat, may soon be able to visit the Angkor Wat Archaeological Park for free. But first, more from our main story. As we recently reported, Myanmar has caused global outrage by executing political opposition and those who dare to question its illegal rule. Now, ASEAN has issued a stern warning against any further executions. Malaysia has taken a particularly stern line and are calling for the possible suspension from the ASEAN group itself. The February coup has left Myanmar in disarray, with the death toll from the brutal military crackdown at 2,100 people. And now, with the brutal murder of political opponents, the illegitimate military regime has shown little but contempt for the ASEAN Pact, and anger is growing at the junta's continued stonewalling tactics. Myanmar executed 4 prisoners last month, in a move roundly condemned by ASEAN members who are voicing increased frustration. The Prime Minister Hun Sen said, "If more prisoners are to be executed, we will be forced to rethink our role." And the executions of these opposition activists went ahead despite the appeals from himself and from many others. A spokesman from Malaysia has said, "If there is no progress, then the leaders will have to ask the hard questions when they meet in November, and suspending Myanmar from the regional bloc is a real possibility. They are making a mockery of the 5-point consensus. There is no respect for the ASEAN leaders. There is no respect for the ASEAN chair." His comments were echoed by Indonesia, who said there was no progress towards peace and no goodwill or commitment from the junta. And they were frustrated by the continued broken promises. It surely can't be long until the tempestuous child of Asia is no longer welcome among the civilized nations of the ASEAN. Sihanoukville businesses have been warned of closures if serious crime takes place on their premises, and there is growing exasperation for the rampage of crime that seems to be unique to the streets of Sihanoukville, often involving violence not seen anywhere else within the kingdom. Murders, gun crime, and major violence. It seems to be fast becoming a daily occurrence. In a move to crack down on crime in Sihanoukville, the provincial governor has announced that in the event of shootings, abductions, drug use and other crimes at casinos as well as other businesses, strict measures will be enforced, including closing the establishments. He warned that provincial authorities would not only shut down the businesses, but also ask the government to revoke their licenses, with the perpetrators being punished according to the law. The launch of the administration Command's Tough Action was announced this week due to the shooting death of 2 Chinese nationals and the wounding of a further Chinese man. According to the police report, immediately after the incident, police intervened at the scene and searched for the perpetrators, and that resulted in the arrest of suspects for questioning. But while the search still continued for others who are currently on the run, and with the widespread use of fake passports, it may be that they will never be caught. A spokesman for the provincial hall said yesterday that the provincial administration's crackdown on casinos and business owners would start immediately. Yet, he did not specify what the operating procedures would be. The tragedy is many who live within the kingdom consider Sihanoukville a no-go zone. It is viewed more as a city that is stalked by gangsters and violence, not the sleepy seaside resort it once was. There has been some astonishing news. For many years, expats have been asking for access to Angkor Wat Park. The feeling being, it seems a little unfair that those who live, work and pay taxes within the kingdom have to pay to enjoy the park, when their families may pass freely. Well, that may well be about to change. Free entry to Angkor Archaeological Park is on the table for foreigners who have lived and worked in the kingdom for 2 years or more. The government has announced this week Prime Minister Hun Sen decided to allow free entry for long-term foreign residents as it will boost domestic tourism. Normally, foreigners visiting the park are hit with a hefty entrance fee of $37. A spokesman for the Ministry of Tourism said this week the free entry plan has yet to be implemented as officials are finalising the details. He said, "I think the government's decision to allow foreign residents to visit the Angkor Wat area for free will be implemented in the near future. We are now discussing how to make the plan work." He added that the government's decision-making policy is beneficial as it facilitates investors as well as other foreigners to work and live in Cambodia for extended periods. An Apsara National Authority spokesman said that once the decision is announced, he expects free administration to the park will attract foreigners who live outside of Siem Reap. He said, "I don't think the decision to allow foreigners who have stayed in Cambodia for 2 years or more will affect the income of Angkor Wat enterprises. On the contrary, it will create employment opportunity for Cambodians within Siem Reap." And many expats will echo this sentiment, and we await confirmation. And here at the Khmer Times, we will be sure to keep you updated. If you have children attending schools, you may have the same concerns as many others, and that is the nutritional value of many school meals. They are often laced with low-quality produce, high in fat, sugar and salt, and the worrying trend of kids washing this down with caffeine-laced sports drinks is not a good cocktail for a healthy diet. Most schools are still selling food that could pose a risk to children's health, and government officials have stepped up efforts to inspect food sold at educational institutions to ensure that only healthy items are available. A Ministry of Education spokesman said this week that to ensure that students are eating healthily, the ministry will inspect meals available at schools. He said that the primary food categories that are restricted or prohibited in schools are expired products, alcoholic beverages, drugs, and food without clear sources. Also sweets and energy drinks, as well as coffee and confectionaries. But the deputy chief at the school health department said there are many schools across the kingdom that are still not enforcing these restrictions. He said that students ignore the dangers of eating certain items that are unhealthy, and a poor diet is a real danger as it can lead to malnutrition and illness such as diabetes. And he rather worryingly added, "Expired food and items from unknown sources are at the central focus of the inspection efforts." With there being little or no regulation on what food is sold within schools, the onus very much falls with the parents to ensure their children are being fed an acceptable diet. The Khmer Rouge is a scar so deeply ingrained with not only the psyche of the Cambodian people, but also the land itself. As with every landmine explosion, another casualty is added to the list of millions of victims. Well, this week, one man explained why he joined the Khmer Rouge and how he feels about it now. A former Khmer Rouge soldier, now residing in Takao, recently revealed that it was his anger and hatred for nobility that drove him to enlist in the Khmer Rouge, a decision he has regretted for the rest of his life. Mr. Heng, now 72, grew up with little education, and in 1973 he left his wife and 2 children to join the Khmer Rouge. The main reason was his anger for General Lon Nol, who overthrew Prince Sihanouk, as well as his hatred for arrogance and ego shown by the Khmer Republic military's officials. He said one of Lon Nol's military commanders was an arrogant, violent man, and everyone was afraid of him. During a protest against the ousting of the prince in 1970, he shot and killed many of the protesting students, and I hated him. Upon being recruited, he would be fighting for the next 2 years. After the country fell to the ruthless regime in 1975, he was appointed to a civil post in his hometown. But the lack of trust among senior cadres and internal purges caused him to escape with many others to the west of the country. Heng was eventually captured and detained by the Vietnamese forces. After he was released in July of 1979, Heng knew it was the wrong decision to go back to the Khmer Rouge, so he applied to the new government to become the chief of his village. In this new post, he was given an AK-47 to protect the village from the Khmer Rouge attacks. He said, "Nowadays, I try to do good deeds so that I can feel at peace. The past is now long gone, but the memories certainly still haunt him." And now it's time to look at our sports news. The Premier League in England is back with us. In the first week, there were some astonishing results.
And starting from the top, we see that Arsenal got off to a great start in the first game of the season, beating Crystal Palace 2-0. Chelsea just scraped through at Everton 1-0, but Tottenham were the most convincing this week, a 4-1 win over Southampton. But there was a shocker. Brighton, that team on the south coast, beat Man United 2-1.
It's time to have a look ahead and see what the weather has in store for us next week.
Well, the weather report is as it has been for week after week, which is rain and more rain. Subsequently, we're going to have an interesting fact about rain. Did you know that the smell of rain has its own name? And that is petrichor. So there'll be plenty of petrichor this coming week.
This has been the Khmer Times News. You can contact myself at the studio by mailing us at ktnewsstudio@gmail.com. Please do subscribe and comment and stay up to date with all the breaking news by following us on both Facebook and Telegram. This has been Paolo Bonini, and that was the week that was. I'll see you next Saturday for your weekly roundup.